As you notice right here, this shoe seems much shorter than it should be. Well, a lot of times when using flip-flops, you may go down a half a size or a whole size depending on your nail placement. But make sure that you fit the shoe kind of full, because the thickness of the pad will narrow your shoe up once you nail it on. When fitting the shoe and pad, measuring it up together, you want to set your heel placement first, because then you want to see how far your toe sits over, and you want it kind of flush. So you may have to push the pad back a little more and then eventually maybe take it off from here. But you have to try to look for where it best fits your nail placement, where your toe is and where your heel is. And it takes a little getting used to fitting these and getting them to the spot. You make sure you look on both sides to where you want it fit, and right there it looks pretty good. Once you have your fit where you want it, then you'll do your chalk marks, and these are very, very important, where you don't want gaps between your shoe and the ending of the pad. When you make your cuts and you do your marks, they have to be really precise so you have a flush fit back in the heel. When marking these shoes, try to cut on the long side of the mark. You'd rather have it too long than too short, because you want a nice flush fit of the heel of your shoe and the end of the pad here. You can always then in turn go to the grinder and give it a precise measurement for your fit. Now we can see that I can even my mark, and I have room to bring it back to make it more straight and flush. There's a couple different ways of riveting this pad on. Some farriers choose to put one toe rivet. Some farriers choose to put two rivets. I like, if you're going to use a heel rivet, to move it up just a little bit back from the heel. Sometimes you may want to just rivet one side at a time to make sure you don't get any displacement of your shoe, and cut it and rivet it. One important part when cutting and riveting these nails into these pads, it's softer than you realize. You only want this rivet set down in, lightly hammered, and then check the side how much it divots in, because you don't want it to give any weak point by squeezing it too much in that particular area with the rivet. I like cutting the rivets down, and the rivets are not really made to hold this pad on that tightly, but you do not want to over hammer the rivets. So if I'm putting this rivet into a crease, I usually like to use the ball peen hammer so it goes down in there a little. But as I stated earlier, you cannot hit these rivets too hard, because this pad is softer than you realize to the feel. I hit a light gently so it's not displacing too much on either side. Turn around and gently rivet that in there, just to keep this in position while I cut this off, and why I grind the pad to my position that I want it. I check the back, and I see if the rivet, this one could be a little tighter, it's a little higher. And now I got a nice flush on that one. And it's okay to be just a little indentated. But once you get more experience putting these pads on, I've gone to most of all my horses with no rivets. Once you get really good at fitting them, cutting them, eventually you can go to no rivets at all. A lot of guys will just put one in the toe, which is probably your next transition after you leave the two, go in the toe. But if you have a horse that's sometimes grabbing the shoe or twisting the flip-flop possibly, you might want to stay with rivets. I'll use a straight edge utility blade. Cut around. You do not want to grind this material on a grinder. Then I'll open these if you want them open. You can keep these as optional to keep them closed if you want to use packing underneath. I would only suggest soft packing under these because there's anything too rigid, there's a lot of movement up and down of this flip-flop. We'll open these portholes, and it's very important on an everyday basis that the groom cares for this flip-flop by looking underneath and why they bathe the horse to wash, if needed, underneath the pad to keep sand and sediment and rocks and debris from building up over a period of time. So I cut these holes out. Every day the groom look underneath, if needed, wash underneath the pad, and keep an eye that there's no large rocks or anything that gets lodged under there, excuse me. Okay, now before I do my final fit and rasping of this pad, instead of grinding, we'll use a rasp. It rasps really well. I'll check and look at my fit all the way around and see approximately where I want and how much to rasp off. Now I'm going to give a nice flush rasping with the coarse side of the rasp. Just go around there. Come back with the finished side. Give it a little. Turn around and do the heel. I already have in my head approximately how much I want to take off. But if you notice, I'm on an angle right now with the coarse side of the rasp. And the reason I'm putting this on an angle is for the when horses overreach, it's just like you're finishing a shoe. With that overreach, you don't have that straight edge in the back for them to grab as easy, in case they catch just at the middle of the shoe or under.
I'll swap sides.
Notice all this filings comes off really easy with a rasp. And you can take your time, not take too much, so you learn how to get your fit, and then go back to the horse and check your fit before you take too much off and you wish you hadn't. Get down there and I'll check really close. You leave a little fullness. I'm just going to take a little more off the medial heel on this particular horse. Use the fine side to finish up all your straggles, loose ends there. Final fit. That's it. I beveled this edge for the horses that overreach, so it's not just a flat, straight surface. It helps with shoe pulling, having that thinner area that faces the ground a little beveled. dressing after I nail this on back in the heels with the rasp. I like it being a little full, and then once I'm able to pull the foot forward, you can see much better your fit after nailing the shoe on and finishing. Just giving a final fit of the pad. It's very easy to fit with a rasp. Sometimes you may want to pick the foot up and bend it under and check your length back here. Sometimes it might be a little long, and it's not hard at all to give you a final shortening of the pad in case it got a little long on you. In doing so, you'll have to taper the bottom like I did before, just so it's not such a big straight edge. As showing you again, we cut our hole to give us traction and also lighter weight for your gaited horses. We have our stud holes. It's very important to tell your client not to overstud these. Just put them in nice and firm, but not overdo. We have our 2-degree wedge to help us with our low negative palmar angles. We have our normal flip-flop that can be used on a high heel and the wedge be used on a low heel. Having our great surface to help horses stay up from being negative palmar angle in their strides or low heel. And I feel after using these, I found that the feet are better than my normal flip-flops underneath. I can't tell you why. Maybe it's antimicrobial, but the evidence that I've seen after using these, the feet are better than the other flip-flops that I've used. So Curtis developed a pad, and we have found the same results underneath the pad. The feet look terrific. The material that we've used has been holding up greatly. We've been able to reset these flip-flops many times in the standardbred world, which really tears through shoes quicker than any probably discipline that I know of out there because of the stone dust racetracks.